Gehenna will never make peace with Trinity, but hey, at least they're Gucci with Hyakyako. As the second Gehenna x Hyakyako event, Rowdy and Cheery is finally arriving to Blue Archive Global this Tuesday, signifying the release of both Guide Tsubaki's and Umika's new banners, as well as Memories and Izuna's rerun banners, with the latter two not being covered in today's video since they have been around for a very long time already. So, with a broken heart, since there's no Guide Pina and my sweet baby girl, the love of my life, Erika, here is a short review on both Guide Tsubaki and Umika. First, let's start with the second sleepiest student in Kivotos, it's Guide Tsubaki. Low-key though, her guide outfit is kinda hot, even though her features aren't as apparent, especially those luscious legs and those buttons hanging on for dear life, trying to contain those calcium cannons. Ooh mama! Good golly gumdrops, I'm losing my inner discipline the longer I look at her, cause all I wanna do is get some sleep training with her. So, what kind of student is Guide Tsubaki? Well, unlike her regular version, Guide Tsubaki is now a permanent special piercing supporter, and these are her terrain moods. D combat power in urban terrains, S combat power in field, and B combat power indoors. The equipment she uses are shoes, badge and necklace, with the latter two being particularly important since it improves her healing ability. Let's talk about her skills. Starting with her 6-cost EX, which creates a round-shaped area lasting for 45 seconds, increasing all allies' attack as long as they stay within range. With her basic skill, which procs every 45 seconds, she heals the ally with the lowest health while increasing their crit res for 30 seconds. Her enhanced skill boosts her healing, and her sub-skill increases your entire team's attack. At UE 40, her enhanced skill plus grants her more healing, and at UE 50, her field combat power upgrades from S to SS. So, how good is Guide Tsubaki? Well, for starters, she is a strong AoE attack buffer, mainly due to her potent EX skill. While it may be quite expensive at 6 costs, it is compensated by its high multipliers, being able to increase your striker unit's attack by a whopping 70.7% at max level, massively improving their damage output, and this buff lasts for quite a while with a lengthy duration of 45 seconds. Not only that, since it is AoE, she is able to buff all your striker students' attack with just one application, and this is made easier with its wide range. Thus, similar to other AoE buffers, she is more effective in teams with multiple DPS units, as she can greatly boost their damage in one go. Moreover, she also has one of the best sub-skills in the game, i.e. being able to passively increase all allies' attack, with this buff going as high as 17.3% at level 10 sub-skill. So, stack this together with her level 5 EX, and she can provide an 88% attack boost to your striker units. Other than that, her basic skill is decent. She can heal your dying unit by a fair amount, and her ability to increase their crit res is a welcome addition. However, its activation time of 45 seconds is unfortunately way too long, so you shouldn't rely on it as your main source of healing. Tying into this, her single target heals become stronger with her enhanced and enhanced skill plus, as they increase her healing stats, though UE 40 Guide Tsubaki isn't as important. As you can tell from everything that I just said, Guide Tsubaki is pretty similar to Kotama, with the former being touted as the premium version of the latter. So, let's compare them for a bit, shall we? Firstly, they are both special AoE attack buffers, though Kotama is explosive while Tsubaki is piercing. Next, in terms of EX skills, Tsubaki's buff values are way higher, with hers again being 70.7% at max level EX, while Kotama's is only 47.4%, so there's a 23.3% difference between the two. Not to mention, Tsubaki's has a longer duration of 45 seconds compared to Kotama's 30 seconds, though her EX costs twice as more. They have very different basic skills too, with Kotama's focused on reducing the enemy's attack, while Tsubaki's grants a single target heal. And if you're wondering which is better, well, they both have their own uses and are helpful in different scenarios. they also have the same exact sub-skill as they can passively increase your team's attack. Finally, being a 1-star unit, Kotama is much easier to obtain compared to Tsubaki, as all you need to do is pull or get more of her LFs through the total assault store. So, as you can see, Guide Tsubaki and Kotama are similar to one another, and who you use depends on the situation you're in, the team you're using, or the enemy you're up against. This brings us to the next segment, Guide Tsubaki's users. Seeing as she is a powerful special AoE attack buffer, this means Guide Tsubaki is pretty flexible, as she can be used in a bunch of different content, where again, you would primarily want to use her in a multi-DPS team setup. As such, like other AoE buffers, her best use lies in Fury of Sex. In this mode, once again, you can bring in 6 strikers, multiple of whom will be DPS units, specifically auto attackers, and Guide Tsubaki's EX will be extremely useful in increasing their attack all at once with just one use, requiring less time and cost to do so compared to a single target buffer, and her potent buff can greatly improve their damage output. Plus, her 6 cost barrier is easily overcome in this mode due to the cost meter's fast recovery speed. With all that being said, if you have seen videos of senseis clearing the higher difficulty floors of FOS, you would have noticed that many of them opt for Kotama instead of Guide Tsubaki. Well, this is because Kotama's basic skill is much more effective on the higher floors, where Set has tons of attack. Around 17k to 22k attack from floor 75 to 99, and 23k to a massive 47.8k attack stat from floor 100 to 124, allowing him to shred through your students if you aren't prepared. Hence, Kotama's basic skill is more practical on these floors, as she can decrease his attack by nearly 20%, which doesn't sound like a lot on paper, but it can make a world of difference. Plus, it's more beneficial than Guide Tsubaki's single target heal. Sure, her heal could help save a student, but it can't help your other units who might also need healing. And this is a temporary fix, since that student could still die later on. On the other hand, Kotama can increase your whole team's survivability by directly reducing Set's exorbitant attack. Not to mention, her basic skill takes 30 seconds to activate with a downtime of only 10 seconds. Meanwhile, Guide Tsubaki's takes a whole 45 seconds to proc, making it unreliable. Oh, and by the way, in case you're wondering, her basic cannot heal the obelisk since only EX skills can restore their HP. Thus, on the higher floors, Kotama is the better option and is very much preferred over Guide Tsubaki. Nevertheless, Guide Tsubaki is still a good option for the lower stages, where survivability shouldn't be a huge issue, and her higher buff values can help clear these stages faster. Aside from Set, in terms of other raids, while she can technically be used in almost every single one of them, her pick rate isn't that high. This is because, for one, there are other superior buffers that have dominated the special slot as they are much stronger. Plus, her 6 cost in these raids can be quite steep, especially since your cost meter doesn't recover as fast, and you can't halve hers down to 3 since she is a special student. So, Kotama is once again favored due to her cheap 3 costs. Regardless, you can still use her in a 2nd to 3rd team, maybe for Torment difficulty if you have no other option, where again, you should probably try to use her in a team with more than one DPS unit. So, should you skip or pull for her? Well, in my opinion, if you want an extra AoE attack buffer for in case, like maybe for Fury of Set or for one of your Torment teams, then sure, go ahead and pull for her. However, personally, I feel that you may also skip her, as you can just replace her with Kotama instead, who is very much easily accessible and obtainable. And while the latter does have lower buff multipliers, she can still get the job done. Plus, as I reiterate, she is much more effective than Tsubaki in the higher floors of FOS, as well as other raids. Not only that, there are also other significant upcoming units. For instance, Ben Kazus and Ben Yoshimi. both of whom are limited and important for Raid FOS, as well as Nagisa and Toki for those of you who don't have them, cause they too are limited. So, in my opinion, you can skip Guide Tsubaki, save your paroxines, and wait for her to spook you instead. But if she is your wife, and you've been waiting for a long time for a Tsubaki out, then ignore everything I just said, go ahead and pull for her. It's time to move on to the girl who loves festivals, it's Umika. Listen, I'll be honest, Umika has definitely flown under my radar a bit, but I do think she has a pretty L2D, and she's really cute. She reminds me of Hibiki because they are both adorable dogs, and I think she 100% deserves more recognition, cause so far, the only thing she's really known for in the community is, well, her bad posing in pictures. Like, it's fucking terrible. Cause what the fuck is this, Umika? It's reminiscent of, well, you know what it looks like. You've seen the memes, I don't have to say it. Swiftly moving on, let's look at what kind of student Umika is. She is a Mystic DPS striker with special armor, and her terrain moods are as such. B combat power in urban terrains, S combat power in field, and D combat power indoors. She uses the typical DPS equipment set, which consists of hat, pin, and watch. It's time to take a look at her skills. Umika has a 3-cost EX, allowing her to summon a firework launcher that lasts for 50 seconds, and up to 5 launchers can be on the field at a time. These launchers have their own basic skill where they deal damage to one enemy after receiving a launch command from Umika, and this command is removed when they proc their skill. Umika's launch fire order is triggered from her own basic skill, which activates every 10 normal attacks, and it also increases her attack for 30 seconds while further boosting the attack of all summoned launchers for 7 seconds. Her enhanced skill increases her max HP, and with her sub skill, for every 55 normal attacks, she increases her own attack for 40 seconds, while reducing the cost of her next EX skill use by 3. Her enhanced skill plus at UE40 provides her with additional attack, and her field combat power is converted from S to SS at UE50. So, is Umika a good damage dealer? Well, she is a pretty unique Mystic DPS student to say the least, since she relies on her launchers as her primary source of damage, being able to summon one to the battlefield for the low cost of 3. These launchers also have quite a bit of health, gaining up to 42.5% of Umika's max HP at level 5 EX, and they last for the long duration of 50 seconds. In terms of damage, these launchers can actually pack quite a punch, as they can deal tons of damage with their basic skill due to their very high multiplier of 2887% at max level EX. Their damage output is further boosted with Umika's own basic skill, which increases their attack by a massive 122% at max level, though this potent buff only lasts for a short period of time. Not to mention, you can also apply other students' buffs onto these launchers. So for instance, using Guide Tsubaki's EX to provide a 70.7% attack increase to the launchers. And because you'd ideally want multiple launchers on the field, AoE buffs are extra effective as it allows you to buff all of them at once. So, combine all these together, and it results in the launchers being able to hit like a truck, letting Umika destroy the enemy, especially if she has multiple launchers on the field. Other than those, Umika also has a number of attack boosts to her own self. For one, her level 10 basic skill can increase her attack by 22.6%, with this buff lasting for a decent amount of time at 30 seconds. Not only that, at UE40, she unlocks even more attack, and finally, if she manages to proc a sub-skill, her attack is further boosted by a whopping 61.3% for a whole 40 seconds. All these attack buffs can actually strengthen her normal attacks, allowing her to hit fairly hard even without her firework launchers. Going back to her sub skill, it is pretty good as it can reduce the cost of her next EX skill use down to 0 since it decreases by 3, essentially making it free, though the requirement to proc this skill is quite steep since she needs to perform 55 normal attacks, which can take a while, so this skill is much more likely to activate in longer battles, and you would want to pair her with attack speed buffers to increase the frequency of the skill activating. With all that being said, Umika can be quite tricky to utilize, since it can be hard and complicated to use / coordinate her. First off, again, these launchers deal damage whenever Umika's basic skill procs, as she issues a fire order, and it activates every time she performs 10 normal attacks, which does take a bit of time to pull off, though again, this problem could be overcome with attack speed buffs. With that in mind, you need to know when her basic skill will activate so that you may time it with the buffs from your other students. Cause let's say you buff the launchers too early, then the buff could potentially expire before the launchers even attack. Or if you do it too late, then perhaps the launcher doesn't receive the buff in time. Not only that, while the launchers do last for quite a long duration, you will probably only be able to summon up to 3 launchers, maybe 4 at a time, before one eventually expires, cause it can take a while to summon one due to skill rotations, animation time, and etc. All of which together may take longer than 50 seconds. So, TLDR, the combination of having to balance between deploying as many launchers as possible and making sure none of them expire when she issues the command, while buffing them at the right time, as well as other stuff like ensuring the launchers or Umika herself doesn't die, and timing the launcher's activation with the boss's vulnerable phase, can be very difficult to pull off, requiring a lot of patience and trial and error. But if you successfully do it, her full potential is unleashed. Now, for her users. Umika can be used in certain content where she would act as a decent blue DPS option. In terms of raids, you could potentially use her in Urban Shirokuro, where her launchers have the added role of blocking the snowballs and park rides, while dealing pretty good damage to the bosses. Or perhaps in Fuel Gauze, to bait some of his hard-hitting attacks and inflict good damage to the real Gauze in Phase 2. You might also be able to use her in Fuel Roadzilla, where her launcher might be able to bait the laser, or in Grand Assaults like Blue Armored Hieronymus. Other than raids, you could also probably use her in specific joint firing drills, for instance maybe in ones where summon stuff / basic attacks deal more damage, or possibly in defense joint firing drills. You know, the ones with a ton of minions approaching, where you might be able to use her launchers to aggro the minions and gather a bunch of them in one spot, then use an AoE EX to take them out. However, Umika is best used in Blue Armored Fury of Set, where she can be a reasonable DPS choice in this mode, as she alongside her launchers can act as a solid AA DPS unit, dealing decent damage to him. In this mode, you would want to pair her with attack speed buffers like Ben Kazusa or Nyuya Akari in order to increase the rate at which she performs her normal attacks, which would subsequently increase the frequency of her basic skill activating, since she can reach the 10 normal attacks threshold quicker, allowing her launchers to deal more damage, as well as improving the chances of her sub-skill proccing. Now, despite everything that I've said, unfortunately, so far, I've personally not seen her be used much anywhere, not even in TFS, her best content. This is mainly because, like I previously mentioned, Umika can be difficult to use, since she requires a lot of micromanaging to be really effective. And it can be hard to do so, especially on the harder difficulties like Torment or Floor 75 to 124 for FOS, where you'd have the extra worry of survivability, with the boss hitting much harder. Not only that, there are many other blue DPS units in the game who are much simpler to use and are stronger than her. For instance, in Blue FOS, while she was a decent pick during the early days of this mode, units like Sakurako and Swimsuit Izuna were still very much preferred. And when Shiroko Terror was released, boy oh boy, her pick rate plummeted even more due to our favorite bank robber being able to demolish Seth. For raids, well, while I did give some hypotheticals on some of the raids where she could be useful in, sadly she isn't really used in either of them as well, cause again, there's just way superior blue DPS options to choose from. But you may still use her in certain joint firing drills if the necessary requirements are met or on the easier difficulties of those content that I just mentioned. Again, not to say you can't use her on harder difficulties, cause you certainly can, a number of senseis have, but you would need to really understand how to utilize her. So overall, should you pull or skip Umika? In my opinion, while she is a decent Mystic DPS unit for FOS for now, however, she is still easily replaceable by other stronger and simpler to use blue DPS students. Even much more so in the future when Shiroko Terra arrives to global. Not to mention, she also doesn't see a lot of use in other content, including blue raids, except for maybe very specific joint firing drills. Hence, I personally feel that you should skip Umika, use your other blue damage dealers instead, and save your paroxysms for other upcoming important units. Or if you really want to, go for Guide Tsubaki instead. The only reason that I can think of that would justify pulling for Umika would be if you're one of the 6 Umika fans. In which case, enjoy our adorable festival doggo, my friend. Just remember to not take any photos with her or you'll end up with whatever this is. And that's all for this week's review. Overall, in my personal opinion, even though Guide Tsubaki is a strong attack AoE buffer, you should probably skip her since she is permanent, so you can pray for a future spook. With Umika, she too is an easy skip, and you probably shouldn't bother pulling for her unless she is your waifu. Meanwhile, as for Izuna and Mimori, the other 2 banner characters, while the former is an extremely powerful blue AA DPS student, while Mimori is useful in certain teams and situations, they are both farmable after all. You can get Izuna's Alefs from Hard Mission Stage 19-3 and Mimori's Alefs from the Grand Assault store, so you don't need to waste your paroxysms to get them, unless of course you're feeling lucky. Anyways, that's all from me. Let me know who you're pulling for if you are. Good luck with your pulls, and I'll see y'all in the next one.